Welcome to another Lunch with Philip and Greg. Today's guest is Jerry Hofmann. Like a lot of my friends, I first met Jerry in the cyber world of the internet. We were both hosting forums at the Worldwide User Group forums at Digital Media Net, and it was many, many years before we met in person. Over that time, Jerry's become a very good friend of ours, and welcome.
Glad you've come out to see me.
Yes, well, that's the thing is, you're up in Denver, Colorado, and we've come up to stay out in the wilderness, away from the internet.
And we're at Estes Park right now.
Which is like coming from the Wild West frontier to visit the internet. It's like a trailhead for the internet.
We don't have internet access at the cabin, so...
Yeah, check our email and have a good lunch. Jerry, what is it that you do now?
Well, I teach a couple days a week at the Colorado Film School, the upper level post classes, and I teach also Final Cut Pro there and Resolve. And then I have my own production company that's just my own little projects I still do now and then. And now I'm working on a company called 24/7 CSR, where we're integrating what I like to call smart video into customer self-help areas and customer service on the internet. And we specialize in that sort of production. So I'm a busy guy.
And when you say you teach Final Cut Pro, you don't mean 7, do you?
No, I'm teaching Final Cut Pro 10. I taught Final Cut Pro 7, and I taught Avid, and I've taught Premiere. And but right now the school is teaching everyone Final Cut Pro 10, and Avid. We also teach Avid there, and it's it's just a tool that's going to change. By the time these kids are out of college, it'll be a different tool anyway. So it's about making edit decisions and that sort of thing, rather than just what the buttons do. Although we have to teach that.
How did your career start?
Well, my mother was a concert pianist and became a large church organist, and she put me in ballet and private voice lessons from the time I was about 5. Then I sang with the big church choirs and did all that as a child, and discovered theater when I was about 12. And at that point, I started doing all the theater shows in the schools and all through high school, and then I went on to college and studied theater again, and then I realized it probably wasn't going to be the best of living, so I went over to the mass comm department and studied film and television.
But you'd had a fairly successful career as an actor.
Oh yeah, when I got out of college, the first thing I did was, dinner theater was still very strong in the country. I'm old enough to have been pre-cable television, which killed dinner theater in this country. But it was a very big industry. There were 40 or 50 dinner theaters just in Colorado. And you could work all the time. And I was a local celebrity down in Colorado Springs, and working all the time. Decided that the town was too small for us. Our way up was either our own dinner theater, which we had a plan that didn't come together, and or go to LA or New York, and LA sounded warmer. So when we went to LA, I thought I wanted to be an actor, and I got into Jeff Corey's acting class. This is the late 70s, and discovered that other actors who I would recognize that were in my class, they couldn't find jobs, let alone somebody that nobody knew. So I went, I don't want to be an actor, what's happening? And this is now 1978, the January of 1978, I decided I'd go into video, to the video industry. I had a degree that spurred me into there, but I didn't know the gear. It had been 5 years. I'd been doing live theater. I was a producer, director in my own shows. So I went and sold broadcast color in the late 70s in Chatsworth, that sold CCTV and broadcast color equipment. I learned the gear, started a production company, and picked up the same clients I had sold to in Burbank. That was my territory because I'd been in show business. Those same clients I went back to and sold production. And that's how I started. That was 1980, I believe, or 81. And I lived in LA till 1993 and made a lot of shows. I didn't do entertainment, I did everything else. Television commercials, a lot of those, a couple thousand of those. And industrial films for everything from aerospace to beauty. It was all over the board. And I loved it because it was short. And you were in the job, you were out of the job, you get paid. It was new stuff all the time, not like a movie you may be on for months at a time, or a television series that's like cutting the same show over and over and they say different words in different places. I mean, that's what I looked at it as that. And I wanted a real life. And those folks don't get a real life. 14-hour days are the norm there. And I just wasn't prepared for that. And I was also a person who had grown up through parents who owned their own companies. I'd owned my own company before I moved to LA. I was an independent kind of guy, and working for a big company to edit 14 hours a day wasn't my idea of fun. So I didn't do that. And I started video when no one else was doing it. And that made it easy to sell because it was so much less expensive than film. And the clients I got were the people that were shooting 16 that wanted to move into video because it saved so much money. So that's how I got started.
So strangely, there you were in Los Angeles,
Oh yeah.
working in the industry,
Yes.
but not in the industry that most people think of when they think of Los Angeles.
The larger part of our industry is not entertainment.
Even more so now.
I would imagine 90% of the dollars spent on moving pictures for any reason whatsoever is not for entertainment purposes.
I believe that the last time I found any serious stats, it was something like 15% of production dollars went to what we think is film and television.
Oh yeah.
That was at least 15 years ago. That was data I had when I was in Australia, so that's at least 15-year-old data. So, and we've had this explosion, this huge democratization of.
Well, you know, it may not have all of the glamour of entertainment, but I had done entertainment. I'd been in a glamorous place. I knew that that was fleeting and kind of silly and didn't really mean anything. And what I wanted to do was my craft and constantly change what I was doing with it. So I got to shoot hair color, and then I went and shot aerospace, and then I went and shot nuts and bolts. You know, it was just fun. And we'd use role play, so I got to still work with actors. I worked for the Lung Association and did a role play how to stop smoking thing. And things, it was just all over the board, and I loved it because I was learning about everybody's business all the time. It taught me to be a much better businessman, for sure. And I understood so much more because I was doing that rather than the mainstream Hollywood, this is the way we do it, and that's that.
So much fun because you learn so much stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's real fun. I've
Oh yeah.
got to walk on satellite dishes, go down in coal mines, all sorts of stuff that civilians don't get to do.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I also had the choice of what I wanted to buy, what I wanted to use, when I wanted to use it, how I wanted to use it. No one was telling me how I was going to do things. And see, for an entrepreneur, that's the only way you can survive and be happy. So, you know, I got to call my own shots there. And I got to watch and follow technology and recognize when Avid was introduced in 1989 at NAB, it was a game changer. And I bought right off the show floor. We owned serial number under 10. I don't remember which one it was.
So you started with linear editing, and then you saw at NAB.
Yeah, we had a couple of Type 5 videotape machines and an ECS 90 controller that sent out a EDL one cut at a time to a computer that grabbed the source and record numbers, and then I could change that to a dissolve or a wipe or, you know, and then and that's how I did my offlines. Then it would generate a disc, a CMX disc. I then took to the $1 million rooms to spend $1,000 an hour to really do the final cut, the final finish, because the cut was done. You know, I wouldn't go to the online rooms until the client had approved the offline. So, and you know, we're kind of entering that world again in the world of 4K, because who wants that in 4K right now? Nobody. So, you know, if you're going to finish in 4K, you don't want to edit in it. So you're going to get to an offline-online situation again where that kind of disappeared for the middle decade here.
Except for offline online now is, I have to click the checkbox to create proxies, or click the checkbox to go back to full quality resolution for output. I mean, it is with Final Cut 10, it's just ridiculously easy to go offline.
Final Cut 10 took all of the tedious things that you had to technically know a lot about away from the editor's province and just made it automatic. You know, it's taken all the, you know, in Final Cut Pro 7, if you'd shot H.264, you really should transcode the media before you even edit it. However, Final Cut Pro 7 would allow you to it acted like it was cutting it fine until you output it, and then it would output the wrong stuff. And it was bizarre.
Who knew where frames were?
Terrible. And to go backwards, you really had to redo it, really re-edit what you'd done before. So you know, but now you just bring in your H.264 and the system knows it has to transcode it if you throw it in a timeline, or you're going to just do it on the way in. Yeah. And it's one button. All of that is taking the big getchas, the big gotchas, away from the system, so the system won't bite you. And I think that's a good thing, especially with the advent of free distribution a la the internet. The cost of doing this has plummeted so far that everyone should be doing it. And as we can, I mean, everyone is doing it.
Yes, yeah.
So, you know, it's a grand time to enter this business because there's so much more work than there was 30 years ago.
We're turning lunches into video.
We're turning lunches into video, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And it's technology that we have now that makes this possible. I mean, the small GoPros, 4K so we can reframe in post, independent recordings, which in and of themselves aren't much.
Right.
But the thing is, we have that beautiful technology that Bruce Sharp originally showed us in Pluralize, that's now in Premiere Pro and in Final Cut 10. We can sync all this up just based on the audio waveforms. This is immensely freeing.
I mean, imagine the old days where you had to listen and then move a frame one way or move a frame the other, and of course a whole frame was usually too much one way or the other, and there wasn't any sub-braid moon, so you just, you know, lived with it. I mean, we're so much more advanced, and it's happening faster now than any time in my career, and I've been doing this for 40 plus years, so I've never seen change as fast as what I'm seeing now, and I love it because it's democratizing. I grew up in the world where he who owned the $1 million rooms got the post business. Right. Today, anyone can buy Final Cut Pro and a Mac and be in this business. So he who has the talent gets the business.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental change that I see in the business that's happened during my lifetime, and I think it's a wonderful thing. Yeah. Because talent will out.
Yeah, not everyone who shoots and edits video is going to make great art, but what we're seeing is that a lot more people who were stymied by the gatekeepers or the cost of entry who could never produce can now get in and do something. You don't need a lot of money to get in and do something.
Gone are the days of the $100,000 camera rigs minimum and the $1 million online rooms. That's all gone, and it will never come back.
Here's my studio. You know, at one level,
I can do more in Final Cut Pro 10 than I could do in $1 million room, and 5 times faster. That is a fact. And I can do I'm 40% faster in Final Cut Pro 10 than 7, which was my mainline editor before. Yeah. So I can't imagine it not being the fastest NLE in the world. It's got to be. I mean, from a workflow point of view, I can try. The wonderful things, what would switch me to it if I was just looking at it myself right now, the second I saw previewing clips, turning them into audition clips, and auditioning clips, and it would automatically change my timeline to accommodate the different, I was sold. I would buy the system on that alone.
Yeah. And skimming, I mean, compared to skimming with double clicking into the viewer and...
This is on an iMac. This is not on a big time machine. You know, it's such a breakthrough in the way you think about editing or the way that you think about the workflow of editing. Nothing's changed in my decision-making process. It's just made it all easier.
I think I derailed your answer in talking about your background because you started talking about seeing the Avid for the first time, and then we didn't actually get back to that.
Yeah, you know, it was 1989 when I first saw Avid. And in fact, it was when I first saw Avid was the very first time I ever saw video playing on a computer screen. Right. And that's what attracted me to the booth. I saw all these little thumbnails and they were playing it in one of the windows on one of the other monitors, and I went, wow, what is this? I had always followed nonlinear digital but video-based editing on the video discs that were nonlinear systems. Laser Edit was one of these places that had it. I believe all of Star Trek Next Generation was cut that way on Laser Edit, non-linearly.
Wow.
But yeah, these were expensive. And George Lucas had a system that he was selling that also failed. No, Montage was another one. George's was called Edit Droid, and it looked like Edit Droid. It was really cool. But again, he was like the only guy that bought it and opened a store where you can go in and rent them. Expensive again. And Montage was expensive, and it was tape-based with a dozen tape machines or so. feeding it. What you did was you put 30 minutes of the same footage on 6 tapes, and then you could shuttle. They would shuttle fast enough to show you playback without making a recording, and it was nonlinear. I saw this, and he told me it was computer disc based footage that we're grabbing from tape within the system itself. It's not something you have to send out to have done, right? That was the first thing he said. And I said, show me. And he had 3 shots done on a timeline. He pulled the middle one out and closed up the other 2, played it back immediately, and he said, that's what it does. And I said, where do I sign? And it was $64,000 for this system. It had a Mac 2 FX, a couple of big 21-inch Mitsubishi monitors, and the hardware to capture and lay out audio and video, or do a tape-to-tape edit of your, cut. That was the first system they made, and you actually could do it like an offline edit to tape that would be high resolution. But the problem was if you were, and it had only 2 tracks of video, half a dozen transitions, and it was so low resolution, the capture, that my 1 gig $5,000 hard drive could hold enough to do a few television commercials.
Wow.
But if you were in a medium shot and you were out of sync, you couldn't tell until you looked at the high-res playback. So that's how I started with that. And in the day when I had that system, it was expensive enough that I needed to rent it. And the ad agencies in LA were my first clients with that, right. Because short form made real sense on the system, and they were excited. And so I cut a bunch of spots for them down in their place because it was portable. I could move my system. It's not like an online room, So that's how it started, and I was on their alpha team. So I helped them develop for the next 10 years. I was close to them.
So you were there from the very
I was
beginning?
on their beta. Oh yeah. Well, the beginning of when they started selling it. I bought their first release, and it was bought within a month of NAB, right there. And I never looked back. I loved it. I just went, this is the future, and I knew it would get better as time went on.
And then you were fast forward a couple of years, and you were exposed to Final Cut.
In 1993, I was in their beta tests for the hardware, so I was actually doing AVR 26 6-8 months before the rest of the world was allowed to do that, and because I was testing it. And I went to the air with these shows. And those were the first shows I ever put from a computer to the air, to tape, then to the air, ever in my life. That was 1993, no, it was a little later, maybe 94. And in 1999, I was asked to teach a class in Avid at the Colorado Film School, and I had such a good time. They had 4 media composers, 1000s, and I had such a good time. I said, I'd love to teach this again. He said, would you like to teach a class in Final Cut Pro? And I said, what's that?
What's that?
And he set me up with a Beyond Mac and a Final Cut Pro 1 and a DV camera, so I could do a little recording and capture it and get the whole system down, right? And in 2 weeks, I realized I could close my doors, save $100,000 on each editing system, own the system within 30 days, for the first time in my life, not have a lease payment on an editing system. Wow. Lowered my overheads by $10,000 a month, and I moved home. And I was so happy. My wife wasn't an editor's widow anymore. I got to see my children grow up through their formative years. So I wrote a book for Apple to support the thing, because it was a life changer for me.
I did have a partner that was called the video widow amongst our friends because I spent so much time at the office. And
That's right.
I'm not sure I'd ever do that again, but I did that and started teaching and moved on with my business and kept it at home and got to make more money, that I got to keep more of the money I could charge, let's put it that way. So it was an awesome experience, those period in the early 2000s. I was having a great time. And then the recession hit me, and it slowed things down all over, probably for everyone everywhere. And except probably Hollywood. They probably did okay. They probably did, because entertainment does well during
Recession. Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of the story, and I'm still, actively working. I don't ever want to stop because I watched my parents' generation stop, and then they got kind of silly or dead. So
Right.
I love the change. You need to embrace change because that's all that the future is going to be. That's all that it's going to be. And if you can't embrace change, you need to think about some other industry maybe because we're in massive flux.
We are.
I have enjoyed what I did with my life. I mean, I didn't make huge splashes anywhere, but we're going to change man.
Not many
But I
people
enjoyed
get to do that, you know.
Very few people get to do that. But each step of the way in the technology change, it was always fought by those already in power. Because change scares, especially in post-production especially, change scares people. And I've watched that happen over many times. Final Cut did it. Avid did it before that. And it was fought by the powers that be then.
So the Avid was scaring the people who were used to linear.
Avid was scaring the people that were on flatbeds.
But then, of course, we have the same argument. There was Steinbeck and then this upstart moviola.
That's right. Every time technology advances in post-production, it's fought by the powers that, or at least the folks that are in post-production, because they despise change because it might mean disruption. And it's, of course, post is they're at the real deadline. They have the real deadline.
Yeah.
They have to deliver on time.
Yeah.
So any change to that workflow that they know they can deliver on time with, they're going to fight against because it involves having to learn something, change something that might not go right the first time or two, so they're afraid to embrace it. And I see that going on right now with Final Cut Pro 10. It's just the latest whatever. And every time there's improvement, it's a lot of it changes slowly, but a lot of it is brought in by students who have been taught these new technologies before they got into the workforce, say at the universities, like our film school would be one of those examples. So we're always bleeding edge there as much as we can so that when they go out, they're prepared for anything that hits them. And those people bring the new technology to the industry because they want, a producer doesn't care what you edit on. He won't care as long as you get it done on time. And if they prefer something faster and easier, why not?
And of course, there are a lot of people who have $1,000 an hour room that they really don't want to see obsoleted.
Of course, and there's always going to be a place for those rooms. If I were doing a beauty spot of some kind of beauty product of some kind and I was going to air it on the most expensive airtime in the world, I certainly would want to finish it in the highest end room I could get the most tweakest, bestest, whatever out of it, because that's inexpensive compared to the cost of this airtime we're discussing. So there's place for the high end, but that's not where all the growth is.
And increasingly, that finishing role is merging down into the editorial process. In Focus, the movie, the Will Smith movie that was released a little while back, that was edited in Final Cut Pro 10, but all the titles that are in the finished movie are the titles that were in Final Cut Pro 10. The vector title is just one of the regular simple titles. They put it in there, it blurs on, blurs off, it's vector based, so it doesn't matter how big you go,
Right.
it's all going to be
Always clean and nice.
always clean and nice.
The only thing I've seen is everything's getting less expensive to get done, whatever it happens to be. And that is freeing us for more production to be done in the first place because more people can afford to do it professionally because the costs are so low on the hardware, the software, the rentals, all of that is so much less than it was. And distribution, of course, is like nigh on free. So
Yes, thank you, YouTube.
with that in place, and that's all happened just in the last, decade?
Yeah.
The explosion of production is going to continue. And we're going to find cameras in use for stuff we haven't even thought about yet today, that we'll use them for some logically good reason. And like cameras, like rear view cameras in your car. That's the sign of this, and video is going to be used for all sorts of wonderful things, and I think it's great. And the fact that it's got so less expensive to hardware-wise and delivery-wise to produce, talent will out. No longer do you have to have the $1 million room to get the business. You can have the business in your den. That's what I'm doing. So, it's a brave new world, and I find it exhilarating.
How do you deal mentally with that, with this constant change and embracing change? Because we've talked about so many people having trouble with the change, and yet, you know, you and I find...
I was lucky enough early on in my Avid career to be on the beta teams. And they were very good about asking us what we wanted to see changed and how we could massage a workflow. So I felt like I was kind of part of the development itself. I'm sure I was, amongst the other beta testers, no doubt. And so when change happened, it was something I felt like I just got accustomed to being part of. So when it happens now, I can't wait to see what it does. I embrace it. I love it. Anything that makes my life easier in post-production is going to give me a better edit, because the time they give me to do it is not changing.
No, if anything, it's getting shorter.
Yeah. I mean, we all know how many ways could you edit a piece, and there's a zillion billion. You could never try them all. And what you try to do is come up with logically with the best edit you can within the time you have. Therefore, if you're working with a system, hardware, you know, a hammer that hammers faster, that's the better hammer.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's all I look at, is speed of the system and how fluid I can be with it, so I can try all my what ifs and end up with a better cut, because I could do more what ifs than the fella that had to keep everything in sync.
Right. So you're not the first person to have said Final Cut 10 is faster.
It's 40% faster than Final Cut Pro 7, and I was an expert.
So what causes that increase in speed? What's the reason for that?
It's a combination of things, but probably the single largest thing is the magnetic timeline. Makes it faster. You really have to work yourself hard to get out of sync. I mean, you have to purposefully go out of sync. And the other thing is, it's just so easy to rearrange clips, and much easier than linear editing timelines. It's so much faster. You can build your timeline faster. It's just easier.
When we say maintain sync, though, I don't think we mean audio-video sync in the classic way we could get sync offset sets in Final Cut 7. We're really talking about maintaining the relationships between clips in secondary storylines and the clips in the primary storyline and the audio that might go with that, and all those elements together.
You just, instead of, I mean, what we've done for our living for all these years is decide at this frame you will see this image and you will hear this bit of audio. Well, it's a vertical thing, but we've been using horizontal timelines to get to it that had to stay in sync. Now, everything is connected vertically, just the way we've always been doing anyway. Trying to get to the result of what we wanted in the first place. This starts with a way of always keeping things in sync, because they're all connected vertically. If you move things side to side, which is what you're doing anytime you work on a timeline, one way or the other, you won't affect this sync, whether it's video, audio, titles over, whatever it is.
Yeah, unless you set a deliberate relationship, like a synced audio relationship or a merge clip in Final Cut 7, you don't have relationships between these clips.
No.
That, you know, people have used tracks as pseudo metadata.
Exactly.
Video one, in a main interview video.
And rolls actually are a better way of doing it,
Absolutely.
because you won't miss it. You won't make a mistake with rolls. Assigning a roll improperly is not easy to do. It's much easier to just do it right. And so if you need to make audio stems or video stems, whatever, it's easy enough to do. And it's certainly as easy as the track-based editors were. And I still, you know, every time I go back to a track-based editor, it feels like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
It's just so much, it's more clicks to do the same thing, and that's the only thing that matters to me. The feature set is rich enough that I can get in any business done that comes my way. So why not, you know, have a $300 app I pay for once and own the rest of my life, and get updated for free for the rest of my life? And I mean, that's the bargain here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've had two periods of fame in your life as an actor in one market here in Denver, but also you were internet famous for many, many years, which is when we first met. So what was that like? How does the two versions of fame vary?
Well, one version was, when you go outside, everyone knows who you are, wherever you go. And after the first couple of weeks of that, it's not very much fun, really. You feel like you have no privacy at all. But it was okay. The second kind of fame was really wonderful because I got to be really famous for 4 days at NAB. And everybody knew who I was. And that was great. And I could walk into Poppy's restaurant and nobody knew who I was. So that was a better kind of fame because you could get it when you wanted to it and walk away easy enough from it. But now that I've kind of stopped posting the last couple of years on the internet and slowed down with that, it's amazing how fame is fleeting. I have the distinct impression that if I walked down the hall at NAB, fewer people would recognize who I am today than 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Well, you've done nothing for them now. What have you done for me recently? Well, nothing. You haven't helped me with...
And that's a human condition, I guess. We just get, we're fickle.
Yeah, well, there are 50,000 posts out there where you've been helping people over the years. You answered...
Currently about 50,000 posts are on the internet.
That's a lot of time investment in helping people.
Well, I enjoyed it. And it was part of my payback to my release from expensive rooms and expensive Avid and expensive rents and people to support the business. It was a celebration of that. So if I wasn't editing or it was rendering, I'd go answer a few questions. It's just I did it over a period of about 14 years, so it added up. And that's really was the case. And I'd never answered questions that I was not sure about the answer. And I think that helped me gain a certain amount of respect because if I didn't know the answer, I didn't answer. And usually if I didn't know the answer, I looked it up.
Yeah.
Or I called you.
Yeah. I tell people that I'm much smarter by email than I am in person or on the phone because if you ask me a question by email and I don't immediately know their answer, I can look it up. Or if I think I know the answer but I'm not quite sure, I will look it up before I reply because, it doesn't take very much longer to do that. But if you lie...
I think one of the other things that kind of got me not as interested in helping people was the fact that anyone could learn Final Cut Pro 10 the right way, not all that difficult. It wasn't as difficult to learn as Final Cut Pro 7 or Avid or even Adobe Premiere. It wasn't as complicated because they took all this tech and threw it in the background. And that was a good thing from my point of view. It just made it easier. And people, the questions asked were just not as interesting because they were so simply answered. Because it's simple to use. I don't know how to put it, but it wasn't as challenging for me.
Yeah, okay.
That's how I think. And that's one of the reasons I kind of went away from posting all the time. I could be caught back doing it again now and then, but it's not as... I'm busy doing other things these days. And teaching has taken up what time I would have given. Because that's pretty much a charity thing I do. Adjunct professors at community colleges don't make a lot of money.
No.
Yeah.
But you're probably getting a lot of that similar benefit by teaching kids in person.
I get to supervise folks in 35 short narrative films every year. How much fun is that? It's great. I get to call cuts and, I get to help them massage it. And it's very creative and wonderful. And I have very dedicated and motivated students. That, I think, has really made me want to stick around because they want to learn, and that's great to be in an environment where you have motivated students. I've always been a believer in shooting at the level that's appropriate for the job.
Appropriate, exactly.
Because you bring in expensive gear for a BS job, you're just losing money. Yeah. Somebody's spending too much money. Either the client or you are. And so it's not fair to the client. You're not making the money he's having to pay for that rental. Why? It doesn't make sense. So that's why I never owned a camera.
People get so hung up on having the best camera.
Well, yeah. I could always rent the best camera. Burke's just up the street,
The best camera is the one you have with you when you need to shoot something.
That's for sure.
So a lot of the time, this is the best camera. And, further to your point, we have in the house normally, at our small apartment, I think 10 HD cameras. There are 2 4K GoPro Hero Black 4s. There's a Hero 2 with a Wi-Fi back. There are 2 DSLRs, which are all capable of 1080p 60. There's 2 phones with HD cameras in the front and back. but I'm only counting those as one each. And there are 2 iPads, each with HD cameras in them.
I would imagine every American adult in America has an HD camera in their pocket.
Yeah.
And that is a fundamental shift in the use of this technology.
Yes.
It really is. And how it all ends out, I mean, you can't hardly, do anything illegal in this country anymore because there's a camera on it.
But it also...
Not that I'm proponent that we need to do that, do things illegal, but I'm just saying that it's everywhere. And it doesn't bother me that I'm being watched by some anonymous machine, because no one's going to pay attention to it unless something bad happens when I was standing there.
Yeah. And people get used to seeing cameras around all the time.
Absolutely. We've gotten used to it. I don't know if it's a George Orwellian kind of nasty thing that's happening to us, but I don't really feel it that way. There's other nasty things on the internet that's much more Orwellian, than these cameras that are everywhere. But it helps us, just the use of the video, keeps it in people's minds. Business owners, it just goes on and on and on, the uses for this. And it's a wonderful thing to see that it gets less and less expensive to do, high quality, which matters in the communication process, I believe. Because anytime you look at something low quality, low resolution, you're not going to believe that message nearly as much as the one that looks like Ralph Lauren's latest television commercial.
Unless, of course, you're trying to say something that was caught surreptitiously, in which case the lower resolution sells that message better than the beautiful 4K or a 6K Dragon or something.
Yeah. Great images at inexpensive costs with inexpensive distribution means that it's going to grow. The use is going to grow. And it's going to soak up a lot of bandwidth, so we're going to need more of that down the time. But nevertheless, it's just a great time to enter the industry because it's so open for all sorts of uses that people are just now thinking of. I mean, look what we're doing here with a couple of hero cameras on a railing, and we're making a 2-camera television show, and we don't even have a crew here. We're the crew.
I know, and that's what makes this possible. There's no way that I want the hassle.
This is a very fancy selfie.
Yes. It's also a proof of concept as that you can produce good quality, interesting video without having to spend a lot of money on a studio and have everyone come into that location. Of course, if we want to do lunch, we'd have to cater at a location, not with a kitchen. Just being able to go where something's happening and put a kit in a bag that fits over your shoulder.
Well, and 80% of human communication is nonverbal. It's the way we say it. We use our eyes, we use our pacing, timing, rhythm, body language, all sorts of things to express the true meaning of what our limiting words are doing for us. And video brings all of that to life. So the communication is necessarily better on video than it would be on just audio or just reading.
Yeah. I've long argued that video production is just another form of literacy. Absolutely. In the same way that, 200 years ago, the fact that you could read or write guaranteed you a good career. And sometimes the career was just reading and writing.
Oh, sure.
But a lot of those jobs have gone away. It doesn't mean most people still read and write as part of their job. And I've long argued that that's exactly where we're going to go with video technology.
Well, there's people out there that are trying to document everything in your life with video. You put a camera on your head, or it's in your glasses or something. It records to some highly classified thing. So you get, the entire 18-hour day recorded on video. And you just archive that. And it becomes a life book. It's your diary. You can relive your entire life.
Without some good metadata, it's going to suck. What's been the biggest change, technology or society, over your career?
It's probably more than one thing, but let's boil it down to maybe 3 things. The first thing was probably NLEs. Gone were the $1 million rooms. Now you could do it for about $150,000, $200,000. You could do a true broadcast finish. So that was a paradigm shift. That slowly got less expensive, and Final Cut Pro put the nail in the coffin of the expense of that. Now you could buy those $1 million rooms, you could buy a system for $3,000, run it in your den, and do more than those $1 million rooms did with video, and here's the second shift, shot by DV cameras, which competed with Betacam.
Yeah.
And close enough for industrial and regional advertisers and people like that to use it, and switch from 16 millimeter completely. That part of the world just kind of died.
Like Super VHS or High 8 weren't really there.
No. So VHS had a 280 line resolution.
VHS went up like that for
Another
20,
30, 50 lines or something, but it wasn't dramatically better. What was dramatic was HD cameras. And of course that quickly followed DV. And what happened was we had $3,000 cameras shooting pictures far superior to cameras that were still in the field that had cost $60,000 for the rig, for the lens and the camera and the tripod and these beta cams that the news guys were using, that sports people were using. And here's $3,000 cameras that are making better pictures. So it was, that was a shift when we got to less expensive cameras. And then the third major shift I've seen in my career is distribution. I used to make $10,000 videos for a hair color company that had to send it to $40,000 beauty parlors to introduce a new product they were selling. They spent $10,000 on the show, and they'd send out 40,000 copies, overnight FedEx, so each copy ended up costing about 20 bucks. $200,000 for distribution, $160,000 for distribution, whatever the math is there, 10,000 bucks for the show. Today, I'd make the same amount of money with that show, same show, only I'd make a little more money because if I got 10,000, I could probably make it for about 2,500. Then it cost me about 5,000 to make because rentals were higher. And distribution will cost us
Nothing.
nothing.
Yeah.
And so the people who have been cut out of this are the tape tube houses and FedEx.
And FedEx has taken a hit, and so has people that invested in online rooms.
Oh, yeah.
Those people took a bath at the end there. And, that's technology marching on. And I think what I see now is it's only going to happen faster. I think that the tools that we use are going to become so inexpensive that 10-year-olds will get them for Christmas. Because the cost of doing this is, how much lower can it go? Maybe not a lot lower, but Final Cut Pro 10 is only $300 for the rest of your life with full upgrades. That's like free in my book. I used to spend $1,000 an hour in these rooms. I used to spend $10,000 a day in them all the time.
Well, let's continue that theme. And what do you think are going to be the biggest changes you'll see in the rest of your career?
Automatic everything. Yeah, metadata is going to rule post-production. We're going to get to the point where our first cut is done by the computer, and that'll become commonplace. After that, I think the fine-tuning probably will never be done by a computer. So there's always going to be a human in there making the final tweaks and rearranging scenes possibly, or losing scenes entirely because the flow of
The emotional component, that storytelling component.
The storytelling components are going to be human controlled for a very long time, I believe. Who knows? But I'm also a believer in anything you think up someday will probably happen if it's useful in any way. Name one thing we've thought of that we haven't been able to do. Well, yeah, disappear, dematerialize, and move over here like Star Trek. We haven't been able to do that, but we've been to the moon.
Yeah. And we have moved atoms, quantum moved atoms about 10 parsecs or whatever it was, a finite amount of, we are getting that point where quantum technology will probably evolve to the point where we may be able to do that. Who knows?
It's whatever's useful for us, we will do. And if we can achieve it, technologically, eventually, we probably will achieve everything we can think of. But one thing's definite, it's going to happen faster, and everyone in our industry is going to have to roll with the flow. Because if you don't, I've watched many people just die in our industry because they didn't roll with these three big punches I just mentioned. NLEs, DV, and the internet. Those things are never going to change. It's never going to come back the way it was. It can't. It won't. Doesn't need to. And because the use is spreading exponentially across all stratas of society, especially in the United States, think about the rest of the world. We're just scratching the surface of those folks. So, we're in a growth period. It's a good time.
What career advice would you give your younger self?
Over-deliver.
Over-deliver, okay. Would you want to expand on that a little bit?
We sell an intangible. We sell something that we can't pull from the shelf and hand to you. We're going to write you a show that hasn't been written. We're going to shoot it, we're going to edit it, we're going to duplicate it, we're going to distribute it for you. But we can't show you what we're going to give you until you paid us for it.
Ah.
It's kind of like surgery. You don't know the outcome until you've already done it. So, because of that, if you give them more than they expect throughout your career, they will never go shopping for another producer. Never. Because that's the intangible they can't put their hands on again. They're a new guy, well, what's he going to deliver? I know what my other guy, he over-delivered. I loved him. Let's go. It's as if you hired a portrait painter for grandma, and you loved it. Now it's grandpa's turn to have his portrait done. Are you going to hire a different painter?
Who are you going to call?
Who are you going to call? And it's the same thing. It's an intangible as much as a painting would be done, of art of some kind. And because of that, if you over-deliver, you don't lose the clients. And it doesn't take that many decent clients to make a career.
Do you think that we need more skills now than we did when we started out in the career? I mean, when we started out, an editor was an editor. Somebody else did title, somebody else did color, somebody else did transitions. And
there's been a fundamental shift in what the industry, at least outside of Hollywood, let's say, expects of an editor. They expect them to be colorists.
Yep.
They expect them to be technologists if the system breaks. They are expected to take care of all of that. That's just part of the job. And as technology moves forward, it's going to become easier and easier to do those things. However, I mean, look at Final Cut 10. I don't believe I've replaced my OS on my working computer now in 2 or 3 years. And if you had told me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that, I would do it every year as a matter of course. Just, it's getting easier, is what I'm trying to say. And as time goes on, I think it will be easier. But still, in this present day, you have to be somewhat of a technologist to be successful in post-production, I think. But just not as much as it used to be. And Final Cut Pro's having a lot to do with that, because it's making all of that transcoding and all that stuff, and going back and forth between offline, online, a button push. It's minimizing the task. Every system's probably going to have pluses that the other system doesn't have. It's always been that way, and they seem to kind of leapfrog each other. But Final Cut is just in a place separate from the other linear track-based editors, because it doesn't attempt to compete directly with them at all. It's a new way of thinking about it, and its workflow is so different than what we're used to that competing directly with feature set, all of them will do what 99.9% of the work requires, but it becomes a matter of taste, and to me, the only thing that really matters is speed. Fast rules. If I can make more edit decisions quicker, I don't get the job done shorter necessarily. However, it's a better edit because I've tried many more different ways of looking at the material, and whether it's narrative or it's industrial or commercial. So that's made it a better editor from my point of view. And the fact that when I do something on a real low budget, I really can get it done and still make a couple of bucks because it's so fast, So I'm really pleased with it. I'd never just go back.
And Jerry, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you or find out more about the Colorado Film School, what would they do?
Go to coloradofilmschool.net, and they can find out all about our school. We make at the school now. We're a hands-on organization. We're always designed to be that way, and we make your first class. You'll make 2 shorts, completely shoot it, write it, edit it, post it. That's in the first semester at school. This year we made over 1,000 short films amongst 450 full-time students.
And personally, they could contact you?
They can contact me through JL Hofmann 1F2Ns at mac.com.
Thank you, Jerry Hofmann, for coming to lunch with Greg and I.